Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
Every single day, it seems like, we get a new nugget of information about the incredible life of our president, Joseph. What's his middle name?
Yeah. What's the latest one, Brad?
Joseph Robinette Biden, okay? The latest one is, when I saw this, I thought to myself, this has to be a joke. This is Babylon B. It's not. Joe Biden said yesterday that his uncle was eaten by cannibals.
I saw that, yes.
I'm going, what? And the story is, I mean, there's so many holes in this weird story. First off, it talks about, this is like, I guess this is his uncle, and that was the Uncle Finnegan or something, and they called him Bozy or something like that. And the bizarre part of the story is that the thing that caught my attention, once again, I'm the son of a World War II veteran, that his aunt's 4 sons, I guess, and this was the whole crazy thing. Supposedly, the day after D-Day, they all signed up for the Army. Now, let's look at this for a minute, okay? First off, D-Day was in 1944, okay? June 6th of 1944. The war was in its less than a year away from being completed in Europe because the Germans essentially were out of it in April of 45. And the Japanese were not out of it till August of 45. So in other words, there was a little bit more than a year left at this point in time, at D-Day, a little bit less than a year for the war in Europe, okay? How does he have 4 uncles that have not been drafted up until this point? Because keep in mind, the war started December 7th, 1941. This is June 6th of 44.
Yeah. Well, he can just say it because nobody's going to fact check.
All right, I'm going like, so in other words, on D-Day, those guys went, whoa, D-Day, we got to join the Army. So they all 4 went down, and his uncle Bozy, as he calls him, supposedly was in a plane. And here's what's interesting. He claims the plane crashed somewhere in New Guinea, and the cannibals ate him. I mean, am I making this up? I mean, remember?
No, it's true. Yeah, he said that.
He said there were no remains of him found. But the interesting thing is, then they had the official, what they call, inaction report or whatever, that apparently he was on some kind of a small observation aircraft, and it was some kind of a twin engine plane, and it crashed in the Pacific Ocean because they had an eyewitness. Apparently there was another plane that was flying along with them, and they saw the plane go down, and one of the 4 people on the plane was essentially rescued. He got out of the plane, but his uncle Bozy and his 2 buddies went down with the plane. But once again, the way Biden tells it, they crashed in the jungle in New Guinea, and the cannibals ate them. And I'm going like, this is so weird.
But do you think, like, jokes aside, or maybe jokes not aside, do you think the whole cannibalism thing, do you think that's why Joe Biden likes to smell people?
You know, the bizarre thing is, he says crazy stuff. Like, for example, I keep hearing the same article, or the same thing. He talks about he's the first person in his family to attend college. You've heard him say that before, right?
Yeah, right.
But yet he also talks about his uncle who his grandfather was a collegiate football star. Now, let me think about this for a minute. Collegiate means if you're a collegiate football star, doesn't that mean you played football in college? And so therefore, if that's your grandfather, would that not mean that you're not the first person to go to college in your family? I mean,
yeah, you would think so. But again, I mean, who's going to fact check it, Brad? Like, who's going to hold him accountable? I mean, we know that NPR's not, right, Brad? I don't mean to push your buttons, Brad, but we know that NPR It's they're less concerned with the truth and more about, an inclusive environment.
John, do you hold it? You mentioned that, so we have to give the official NPR intro.
Oh, right, yes.
Right. We can't get away with not doing it, and here it is.
We are National Public Radio, NPR, where the news is what we say is the news.
Yes.
I love that.
And once again, NPR makes the news yesterday, and I'm thinking to myself, if there was sports betting, or we call it prop betting, on the fact that once Uri, however you pronounce his name, Berliner, he's the guy who was one of their award-winning editors who came out with an article about how screwed up NPR is. Do you think there was a prop bet about how long he'd last before he got canned?
Yeah. And hey, now before we besmirch NPR, because that's way out of character for us, today on St. Louis on the Air, Brad, or on the website from yesterday's show, the headline is how STL Cannamoms is fighting back against the stigma of legal cannabis use. So, Brad, a group of moms have gotten together, and they're tired of society making them feel bad for smoking weed, for doing edibles. It's a support group for moms that just want to do a little parenting while high, Brad. What's wrong with that?
John.
Now, Brad, is that the Babylon Bee, or is that St. Louis Public Radio, St. Louis on the Air?
Will do. That's what John is talking about. That is a common little game that a lot of radio stations play across the country. I think it's done here in town by Annie Fry on 97.1.
Oh, does she do that?
Yeah, where they do the bee or not great. The bee or not the bee, where they read headlines and then the panelists have to guess if it's like a bizarre weirdo Babylon Bee headline or it's a real story. Just like the Joe Biden's uncle being eaten by cannibals. It almost sounds like a Babylon Bee story. Okay, do I have a problem with that? Yes, I do. And
Brad, why? I mean, don't moms deserve a little stress relief, Brad?
Okay, so why doesn't Seagram's come out and put together a group of moms? Hey, moms, you're parenting at home. Don't be embarrassed to sling back a couple of shots of Seagram's while you're watching your kids.
In the morning carpool lane.
Right.
Put a little bit in your Stanley Cup and just be on your way.
Yeah, put that flask in your purse and you'll be on the way to school. And nobody should make fun of you for you.
I gotta tell you though, Brad, the one line from this, not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but it says they centered their group around the hardest question out of the way when making new friends, Brad. Do you smoke? Get that question out of the way, Brad. Because you know what? When you go to STL Cannamoms, you don't have to start with that question. Now, to call back to something that you mentioned the other day, Brad, about John Ashcroft, if I met a woman and she said to me, do you smoke? Talk about going from 12 o'clock to 9 o'clock. You know what I'm saying, Brad?
Well, you know what
But anyway, at least they can get that question out of the way, Brad. Do you smoke?
You know my answer to that is?
What's that?
Only when I catch fire.
Only when you catch fire,
right.
Brad. So, Brad, but look into this because I think that this group is doing some really good stuff, and I think parenting while high is something that we don't do enough encouragement of in our society. Maybe we can give some tax breaks to stone moms, Brad.
John, once again, I've told you this before. I'm an old guy. The day I graduated from high school, if the clouds would have parted and this voice would have come through from heaven saying, Brad, you are on your way to the future. You graduated from high school. The future holds for you casino gambling, legalize marijuana, yes, we'll even have the lottery. You can play the numbers game, and it's all going to be legal in the state of Missouri. I go like, nah, this is Missouri. That's never going to happen.
I was on FanDuel, Brad. I wasn't listening. I was making a prop bet about the AT&T building. What'd you say?
I'm sorry. Okay, let's go back to you steered me off of the NPR
I
thing.
did, intentional.
Well, the Uri Berliner thing yesterday, first off, he gets suspended for 5 days with pay, and I made a joke about without pay, and I made a joke with 5 days without pay means he lost $20,000. I put that on my Facebook page. I had a couple of people that thought that was funny. And then yesterday he resigned. Now, the crazy part of this is that this new lady, what's her name? Catherine Maher? She's got the same name as...
Yeah, she shares a last name with good old Bill.
Bill. All these tweets have come out, and obviously she is like lefty, 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 okay? And I'm going like, okay, here's the interesting thing. Years ago, it was told to me a real simple, a couple sayings that have stuck with me for years. One of my very first bosses in the radio business used to always say, there's 3 impressions you can make in life, good, bad, and none is always the worst, okay? And hold on a minute, I got to clear my throat here. As I was a young radio person working for my boss, E.A.W. Smith, who was an interesting character, a World War II hero for England. He was a Royal Air Force fighter pilot, started in 1939, and at the time, the average life expectancy of a Royal Air Force pilot started, and once again, the Brits were at it, but, not even, before 1940, they were being attacked by Germany back in the late 30s, if you know about the Battle of Britain, the whole bit. Anyway, he was an RAF fighter pilot, survived the war, decided that England was not the place he wanted to spend the rest of his life, and he came to the United States and became an executive, was my boss at the radio station. Okay, E.A.W. Smith, we called him Ted. And this was in the very beginnings of radio starting to do research. And Ted hired a research firm to find out more about what our listeners want and what they didn't want. And they started out by having these researchers come to the station, and they were just all Looney Tunes. They were asking stupid, weird questions that made no sense whatsoever. They were talking to us, hey, what do you think your listeners, what do you think they like best about the radio station? And some of it was just off-the-wall kind of crap. And I guess it got back to Ted that I wasn't real happy about this. And at the time, we were the number 2 station in the market behind KMOX. I was doing afternoon drive, and, I was a young guy full of you-know-what and vinegar. But yet, I was very happy with what the station was doing. And the word got back to my boss that I was not real happy. So one day, Kathy Saganis, who was his executive secretary, I hear in the intercom, Brad Hildebrand to Mr. Smith's office, Brad Hildebrand to Mrs. Smith's office. I walk up to Kathy. I can still see her sitting there, very attractive lady. And she goes, Mr. Smith would like to see you in his office right away. So I walk in, and I sit down, and Ted's sitting there with his little readers. He looked over his readers, and he says, Bloody Brad, I hear you're not real happy about the research crew we've hired. And I said to him, I go, Mr. Smith, the station's doing well. Ratings are good. The station's making money. I mean, what's not happy to be about? And he said, let me give you a word of advice. I don't know who discovered the ocean, but it wasn't the effing fish. Think about that, my son. And he ushered me out of his office. The quickest meeting I ever had with him. And it has stuck with me forever. That if you're swimming around in the ocean, you don't know. If you're a fish, you don't know where you're at. You're just like there. So what this Uri Berliner pointed out was that everybody at NPR is of this same mindset, and they think we're so diverse. We've got, remember the story they had the staff divided in all these crazy little groups, like
I know exactly what you mean.
And I'm going like, what the hell is this? And once again, if you're running a company, don't you want to have everybody on the same page, not in their little groups? You know what I mean? Don't you want to have a united front? I mean, if you're a sergeant, if you're a drill sergeant, and you're down at Fort Leonard Wood and you're bringing all these new recruits, you don't want some guy showing up with pink shorts, another guy showing up with a Egbert T-shirt on or stuff like that. You want everybody on board with the mission, and you want them have a singular focus on what they should be doing. That's the thing that got me. So, in other words, you're dividing everybody. And the crazy part of this isn't the whole aspect of this DEI is that everybody's equal? So why would you divide everybody like that?
Well, here's what, though. I mean, I would make the argument, Brad, if I'm inside there, I believe that we are united in a mission, and we may be diverse, but our mission is to fight against Donald Trump and to fight against the Donald Trump spirit of destroying democracy. Remember, democracy dies in darkness, Brad. And ever since Donald Trump's election, he and his allies have been trying to crush democracy. So at NPR, it's our responsibility to stand up for truth and to fight for democracy, because they're tyrants, Brad. They're fascists like Donald Trump that are trying to crush democracy. So we're united in that. So let's have a group of blacks and a group of transgenders and a blacks of people, or a group of, people in obesity scooters. We're going to have all of our superficial diversity, but we don't need ideological diversity because we're all united against Trump and fascism.
I guess you got a point there, John. You're the smart one in the room. I mean, you always bring up the good points. To me, it's just like, I don't get it. And once again, somebody sent me a not so nice email. Apparently they heard me on the air talking about this. They said, you talk about the government pays NPR with their Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's a very small percentage. Okay. I did a little deep dive into this thing, and not only does the Corporation for Public Broadcast give money to NPR directly, but they also give money to the stations. Like KWMU gets money from Corporation for Public Broadcasting, okay? But what's interesting about this is, do you know the relationship that the affiliates have with NPR?
I don't.
The stations get money from Corporation for Public Broadcast, and the stations, because if you've ever listened to the incredibly boring and tedious fund drives on St. Louis Public Radio,
yeah,
they always talk about, the dollars you send us keeps this radio station on the air. BS. If everybody stopped giving the money, the radio station would not go off the air. They might have to trim back some things. But more importantly, they pay for the NPR programming. So in other words, the money it's almost like being laundered. The money is given to the stations from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and then the stations pay that back to NPR.
They have to kick it up, yeah. And so that sounds very much like a mafia organization. Like if you have to kick a little up, you got to put a little cash in the envelope, and every time you see your capo, you got to give them an envelope.
And going back to the thing where the NPR thing where Uri, however you pronounce his name, Berliner, made the comment that they had Adam Schiff on 25 times during the impeachment trial. And it's funny, remember, Fox Digital did a deep dive in that, and they said, he's wrong. It was actually 32 times.
It was more than that, yeah.
Isn't it ironic that they impeach Trump twice, and they go through this whole crazy, and the last one was like the shortest, and they impeached him, 2 days before the end of his term or something like that. And yet, yesterday, we had an impeachment trial that lasted, 20 minutes? Because the Dems just essentially said, Once it went from the House of Representatives to the Senate for the trial, because that's the way it works. The House essentially indicts and the Senate tries on an impeachment. The House sent up the impeachment to the Senate. The Senate essentially said, hey, nothing to look at here. See you, bye. It's gone. I'm going like, okay, what the hell was that?
Yeah. And the KC Star has an article about that. People can find it at johncommerce.com today, Brad.
God, okay. Last break, we will talk about how Dave Ramsey is the smartest guy in the world.
Oh, yes.
And can I talk about something else? Brian Nieves. Okay, last break, we'll talk about Brian Nieves and a Facebook fight that he got into with a lady who actually came after me as well, too. And I'm going, okay. And if I tell you what it's about, it's so interesting to me that I make my point about this several times, that you could have, I'll tell you what, next break we'll talk about this. And I'll tell you a crazy, weird story that happened at the crap transmitter site. I mean, this is so bizarre, and this is all going to tie things together, okay? Right. Are you excited about that?
I am. I can't wait to hear it.
I bet you aren't. Okay, let me do this. I'm going to hit this button. I'm going to do this, and we'll be back.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?